So we love other podcasts. Obviously, Joe Rogan is one of the podcast greats in America right now. And his podcast is, of course, was already growing for many, many years. However, his podcast has been exploding during the pandemic because people, of course, don't have a whole lot to do and they have more opportunity to listen and watch his podcast. He is concerned, and so are we, about YouTube and YouTube's ability to censor what you put up.
Yes,
and
they do it uniquely too. They don't just like outright take your clip down. They'll do is they'll leave it up and they'll just demonetize it.
They'll demonetize it. Explain what that means, demonetize.
Oh, so a lot of times YouTube plays ads or calculates how much money you deserve based on viewership and things like that. And what they'll do is they'll just put a little mark on your video and say you can't make money off of it. And so any advertisement that's shown on it. Well, actually, a lot of times they'll pull the advertisements.
It's your YouTube that you put together and produced.
A very broad community guideline rule set that is not very specific.
So they're legally stealing, first of all.
Sure.
They're stealing.
In some ways, you could make that argument. And I think, you probably have a lot of credence to it, too.
And if they don't like your message, they'll just downright take it down. They won't just demonetize it. They'll take it down.
Yeah, they'll strike it down. They'll give you, or they'll demonetize it for minor infractions. It's really interesting the way that they do it because for a lot of people, they feel like there's not a lot of rhyme or reason for it.
Which I just can't believe that. And Joe Rogan has signed a $100 million deal with Spotify.
Holy cow, Mark.
So Spotify is guaranteeing him $100 million over a pretty darn short period of time. And Joe Rogan is 52 years old. And this is what the article says in the Wall Street Journal. Had so far withheld his podcast from Spotify. He wouldn't allow them to broadcast it at all because it's up to him. It's his podcast, saying the streaming service doesn't pay enough, and he had been generating significant revenue on other services, such as Alphabet Inc.'s YouTube.
Yeah.
His full library, dating back 11 years, is to hit Spotify's service beginning September 1, and Spotify will be the exclusive broadcaster of Joe Rogan's podcast beginning then. And you will no longer be able to see not just his new podcasts on YouTube, but you won't be able to see any of the 11 years on YouTube. He's completely transferring out of YouTube.
Oh, no kidding. So that's a good way to stick it to him. I mean, he's one of the most watched YouTubers, one of the biggest channels on YouTube. I think this embodies all the free market principles that we talk about pretty regularly, and that's if you don't like something, shop around. Find something that works for you.
I agree, and I think he wants to be more free in what he says.
Yeah, because he does talk about a lot of very, I'm not going to say they're touchy topics, but he talks about a lot of things outside of the mainstream, or he is willing to have opinions on his show that aren't politically correct.
Aren't millennials aren't they big fans of, for the most part, Joe Rogan? There you go.
I love him. A lot of people love him.
I know Adam Couture, our producer, he loves Joe Rogan. Yeah. My son loves Joe Rogan. But what I've noticed is that for the past couple of months, Joe Rogan has been saying things such as, if Joe Biden is the nominee for the Democrat Party,
I might vote for Trump.
I might have to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And he was having that conversation with a number of different people, including Tesla's Elon Musk.
Yes.
And I gotta think that because Joe Rogan is so, basically, your generation loves him because he's so influential that YouTube might decide to pull down some of those podcasts off of their channel. And I think he's concerned about that. I'm not saying he's said anything about it, but if I were Joe Rogan, I'd sure be concerned.
I also think it's a lot of other things too. I mean, he talks about some historically significant topics. He talks about a lot of cultural news and things like that. And he has a lot of people on who do a lot of research into topics that people might not be comfortable discussing. Like, I know one of the ones that he was concerned about.
He's a critical thinker, though.
He's a critical thinker. One of the ones he was talking about that got a lot of weird press was, so he had a lady on who wrote a book about Operation Paperclip. And if you're not familiar with what Operation Paperclip was in the aftermath of World War II. The U.S. and the Soviets had this giant race to pick up Nazi scientists and bring them to their own countries for their own, educational benefit. And the U.S. didn't know that the public didn't know that the U.S. did this for the better part of 40 or 50 years. I mean, if you look at Wernher von Braun, the person who put man on the moon for the United States, he was a Nazi scientist. And we brought him over as part of this operation. And he had a whole 2-hour segment just asking this lady questions about this. And to a lot of people, it was uncomfortable discussing, Nazis on a podcast. And so, these kinds of conversations
Free
I
speech.
think, while yes, they embody free speech, places like YouTube, for ad purposes, get uncomfortable, putting these ads on topics like this, and so they'll, demonetize or do whatever they
Because
can
they
do.
can.
Because they can.
And they
And I think the move like this,
they get to decide solely on their own whether you get to be monetized or not in any given podcast, and they also get to decide whether they just don't want you to see it.
Yeah, and I think a move like this allows people, and it doesn't have to be Spotify. Like if you have a podcast or a show or anything, and you are uncomfortable with the guidelines and parameters YouTube sets on you, and what you view as lack of accountability, because you can appeal these things. They don't just indefinitely like drop the ban hammer on you and call it a day. What they'll do is they'll just say, if you would like to appeal, please appeal, and then you appeal, and you never really get an answer. I mean,
no, because I've done that before.
Yeah.
I've appealed before, and no one actually gets back to you because they don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's, by the way, it used to matter more that they didn't care because it was YouTube and nobody else. But now you have Spotify.
Yeah,
now you have iTunes.
iTunes.
And of course, Apple and iTunes is exclusively listening, but obviously Apple is and has developed its own video service as well. So very soon you're going to be able to see, not just listen to a podcast.
I think
on
a move
iTunes,
like
you
this,
can already.
Yeah, and there's so many more options out there. And it's one of the benefits of living in a capitalist society where if you have an idea, other people can have a similar idea and you can do it. And this move ensures, I think from Joe's perspective, and I think, if he wants to put out the content he wants, he doesn't have to worry about, adhering to some guidelines he's not sure about. He can be authentic. He can have authentic conversations.
But doesn't your generation, the millennials, don't the millennials generally go to YouTube first anyway? Isn't that kind of like the go-to for millennials? I mean, I feel like it is for boomers.
I think it is one part of a larger whole. To some people, it might be the first place they go. Me, I know the show, and then I want to go find it wherever I can find it.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Like, I personally have a Spotify account. I like Spotify better than iTunes, and so if I want to go see a podcast or if I want to listen to something, I generally go find it on Spotify first.
Sure.
But if I can't find it on Spotify, or if I want to see the video attached, I go to YouTube.
YouTube. That's the key.
But that's the key, is the video, which is I think where places like Spotify and Apple are going to.
So that's where I'm confused. So clarify this for me. If he's moving exclusively to Spotify, how are you going to? You're obviously going to be able to listen to him. How do you see? Because I know with my son enjoys actually watching Joe Rogan, not just listening. Whereas there's some podcasts you really don't care whether you see them or not. You actually just want to listen.
One like ours, though, you want to watch the clips. There's a lot that do it that way, and then you want to watch them, and it's imperative.
And we know your mother likes to watch you and give you a hard time, but we're not going to go there.
Hi, Mom. She's been on me.
Hi, Derek's mom.
She's been on me for a shout out. So here it is.
How are people going to see Joe Rogan on Spotify?
That's a good question. I think there's two ways this can happen. I don't know what they're going to do, but he can either, presumably move all the clips and videos to his website, or Spotify can innovate. And Spotify can,
which I think they're going to do.
I think it's the best way for them to go, is to incorporate some kind of video
and go head to head with YouTube
and go
just do it, man.
When you make a big move like you being in one of the world's biggest podcasters, you got to keep going. You got to be pushing the boundaries
and let whatever is said be said.
Yeah.
Stop being. This is what we need. We need more companies like Spotify and more companies like iTunes who just let you say what you want to say because it's a free country.
Yeah.
And not less companies, of course, like YouTube and Alphabet and Google, which decide on their own accord to just demonetize you, as you described earlier, or just pull your video down and say the video is no longer available.
Yeah, and I think, it's well within Alphabet and Google and YouTube's right to do what they want, but there are consequences, and these are the ones you see in a free market where people compare what they're presented and they pick the best option for them.
Exactly.
Yep.
So get this. So Joe Rogan the deal is likely worth $100 million based on certain milestones and performance metrics, according to people familiar with the deal. So congratulations to Joe Rogan. That is freaking awesome.
Joe Rogan
Absolutely
is one very rich man.
Yes, if he's not already, I'm pretty sure he is already.
Wouldn't even doubt it.